At 12:15 a.m. Moscow time, the screen turned red. Not metaphorically, literally red, the color reserved for the end of the world. A sharp alarm cut through the underground command center, a sound designed not to be ignored, not to be questioned, not to be doubted. On the central monitor, in block letters, one word appeared: launch. According to the most advanced early warning system the Soviet Union had ever built, the United States had just fired a nuclear missile. In less than 30 minutes, millions would be dead. The room froze. Officers stared at the screen, then at the man sitting at the center console. He was not a general. He was not a politician. He was not even supposed to make history. He was a lieutenant colonel named Stanislav Yevgrafovich Petrov, and in that moment, the survival of human civilization rested not on strategy, not on doctrine, not on deterrence theory, but on his judgment. Petrov did not stand up. He did not shout. He did not order retaliation. He leaned closer to the screen and said something that by every rule he had been trained to follow, he was not allowed to say. I think this is a false alarm. To understand why this sentence mattered, one must understand the year, 1983. The Cold War was not cold anymore. It was brittle, nervous, and dangerously loud. The Soviet Union and the United States were locked in a spiral of mistrust, sharpened by ideology, military buildup, and miscalculation. Ronald Reagan had called the USSR an evil empire earlier that year. NATO was preparing for Able Archer 83, a military exercise that would later terrify Soviet intelligence into believing a real first strike was imminent. Just weeks before Petrov's night shift, Soviet air defenses had shot down Korean Airlines Flight 007, killing 269 civilians, including a U.S. congressman. The Kremlin expected attack not someday, but soon. Against this backdrop, the Soviet leadership invested heavily in a new early warning satellite system called OCO, the Eye. Its purpose was simple and terrifying: detect American intercontinental ballistic missile launches and give Soviet leaders enough time to order a retaliatory strike before their own missiles were destroyed. The doctrine was launch on warning, no confirmation required beyond the system itself. Machines would see, humans would obey. Stanislav Petrov knew this system better than most. Ironically, he was not a typical career officer. He had studied engineering, not political theory. He was analytical, skeptical, and, dangerously, by Soviet standards, willing to question assumptions. On the night of September 26, 1983, he was not even scheduled to be on duty. He was filling in for someone else. When the alarm sounded, protocol was clear. Petrov was to immediately report the detected launch up the chain of command. His superiors would then inform the general staff, and the countdown to nuclear retaliation would begin. There was no room for interpretation. His role was procedural, not philosophical. But something felt wrong.
The system indicated a single missile launch, then a second, then 3 more, 5 in total. According to Soviet doctrine, this made no sense. If the United States were launching a first strike, it would not be limited. It would be overwhelming, designed to decapitate Soviet leadership and eliminate retaliation. 5 missiles were not an attack. 5 missiles were an anomaly. Petrov also knew the OCO system was new, largely untested, still being calibrated. Satellites were reading infrared signals reflected off cloud tops, trying to distinguish missile plumes from sunlight. In theory, it was brilliant. In practice, it was fragile. The room filled with tension. Junior officers waited for Petrov to make the call. Sweat formed. The alarms continued. The screen remained red. The system insisted, "This is real." Petrov picked up the phone. When his superior answered, Petrov reported a malfunction. He did not say possible. He did not say uncertain. He said definitively that the system was wrong. This was insubordination disguised as professionalism. If Petrov was mistaken, he would be responsible for failing to report a nuclear attack. That was not a career-ending mistake. That was a court-martial, possibly worse. Minutes passed. No missiles hit Soviet territory. The alarms stopped. What had happened was almost absurd in its simplicity. The satellites had mistaken the reflection of sunlight off high-altitude clouds over North Dakota for missile launches. The angle was rare, the alignment precise, the timing catastrophic. The system had done exactly what it was designed to do, and exactly what it should not have been trusted to do alone. Petrov had broken the chain. The immediate aftermath was not heroic. There were no medals, no public acknowledgments, no congratulations. The incident was classified. Petrov was interrogated, criticized for improper documentation, quietly sidelined. The system was not blamed. He was. In the logic of the Soviet military, a man who disobeyed protocol, even correctly, was dangerous. He represented uncertainty, and uncertainty was the enemy of centralized control. Petrov eventually left the military. He lived modestly. His wife fell ill and later died. For years, the world did not know how close it had come to annihilation, or how thin the line between routine and extinction had been. But history, when it finally caught up, saw something else. Not a hero in the cinematic sense, no dramatic speeches, no moral grandstanding, just a tired officer in a concrete bunker who trusted his reasoning over a machine designed to remove reasoning entirely. The lesson of that night is not that technology fails, that is obvious. The deeper lesson is that systems built for speed, certainty, and automation are often blind to context. Nuclear deterrence theory assumed rational actors, clear signals, and flawless detection. Petrov's experience exposed the lie at the center of that assumption. The world did not survive because of balance of power equations or mutually assured destruction. It survived because one human being hesitated. Silence followed the alarm. The screens dimmed. The night continued. And somewhere above the clouds, the sun rose at the wrong angle, unnoticed by anyone who would later wake up to an ordinary morning, unaware that their lives had depended on a single decision made in the dark. The morning after September 26, 1983, Moscow seemed unchanged. The streets, the factories, the endless gray concrete of the Soviet capital carried on with a mechanical rhythm, unaware that the world had come closer to annihilation than any newspaper headline could ever reveal. Yet within the Ministry of Defense, the tremors of that night had already begun to ripple, subtly and invisibly, like a stone dropped in a vast stagnant pond. Petrov's choice had avoided catastrophe, but the aftershocks of what could have happened were only beginning to register in the minds of those who had not known the full weight of the situation. In the immediate aftermath, the official story did not change. No press releases, no acknowledgement. The higher echelons of the Soviet military buried the anomaly within reports labeled equipment malfunction. Petrov was called to several briefings and interrogations, ostensibly to explain the incident, but the true gravity of his action was never publicly recognized. The Soviet system, rigid and procedural, did not reward intuition, it punished deviation. By refusing to report the supposed American attack as real, Petrov had technically broken protocol. He was reprimanded, his career stagnated, and he remained in relative obscurity for decades. The irony was cruel. The man who had saved millions from death was treated as a bureaucratic problem. Yet outside the walls of the command center, the world unknowingly teetered on the edge. Had Petrov followed procedure, nuclear weapons stationed across the Soviet Union would have been readied, launched, and retaliated against what was not a real attack.
the doctrine of launch on warning, designed to ensure rapid retaliation, would have catalyzed the very catastrophe it was meant to prevent. Within 30 minutes, thousands of missiles would have streaked across continents, obliterating cities, annihilating populations, and creating a nuclear winter whose consequences would have spanned decades. Entire generations would have been lost before humanity even comprehended the scope of its self-destruction. The Cold War, always poised on a razor's edge, would have turned into a final war. Step by step, the chain of what did not happen is instructive. The first step was detection, a satellite reading infrared signatures off high-altitude clouds. The second was processing. The OCO system interpreted the signals as missile launches. Step 3 was notification. The alarm system alerted Petrov and other officers. Step 4, the human judgment. Petrov, using his analytical mind and intuition, assessed the improbability of a 5-missile strike being the opening salvo of a full-scale American attack. Step 5, the decision not to escalate. He reported a system malfunction rather than an active attack. Step 6, the non-launch. No retaliatory strike occurred, and the Soviet nuclear arsenal remained in place. Each of these steps, invisible to the outside world, demonstrates the precarious interplay of technology and human judgment. Without Petrov's intervention, the subsequent steps would have been catastrophic. The story of that night, once it emerged years later, had profound implications for both military doctrine and historical understanding. When the event became known outside of Russia in the late 1990s, it sparked debates on the reliability of automated early warning systems. Analysts and historians questioned the wisdom of placing ultimate decisions, the lives of millions, in the hands of untested technology without sufficient human oversight. Petrov's hesitation highlighted the indispensable role of human cognition in systems designed for speed and certainty. It was a vivid counterpoint to the prevailing faith in automation that dominated military strategy at the time. Beyond technical lessons, the incident revealed a deeper truth about the psychology of decision-making under pressure. Petrov was not a general commanding an army. He was a mid-level officer with a technical background. He had no political power, no public platform, no authority to change policy. Yet in that moment, the responsibility of a nation, of humanity, rested upon him. His choice illustrates how moral courage can manifest in quiet, almost imperceptible acts rather than in grandiose gestures. The stakes were cosmic, yet the act was profoundly human: observation, reasoning, and the bravery to trust one's own judgment. As historians later examined the event, they also contextualized it within the larger tension of 1983. Earlier that year, the Soviet Union had experienced heightened paranoia. NATO exercises, rhetoric from Washington, and the downing of Korean Airlines Flight 007 had all contributed to a pervasive sense of impending attack. Petrov's decision must be understood against this backdrop. The psychological environment was one of fear, suspicion, and institutional pressure to obey. That he chose skepticism over obedience, logic over panic, was a testament to his character and training. Without that combination of intellect, composure, and integrity, the system would have consumed him, as it consumed so many who challenged it.
In the years following the incident, Petrov lived a life removed from public attention. He continued his work in the military, but never reached the heights his skill might have warranted. He experienced personal loss, including the death of his wife, and he aged quietly, knowing that his most significant achievement would remain largely invisible. Yet, when recognition eventually arrived, medals, interviews, documentaries, it underscored a universal truth. Sometimes the most impactful decisions leave no immediate trace, and sometimes the heroes of history are those who prevent history from happening. The broader consequences for military doctrine were equally sobering. Nations began to reconsider the role of human judgment in automated systems. Analysts debated the reliability of early warning satellites and the protocols for launch on warning strategies. Petrov's experience became a case study in the fallibility of technology and the importance of ethical reasoning in high-stakes decision-making. The event contributed, indirectly, to the eventual reforms in nuclear command and control systems, emphasizing verification, redundancy, and human oversight. Petrov's story also challenges our assumptions about risk and responsibility. Modern society increasingly relies on algorithms, artificial intelligence, and automated systems to manage complex problems. Yet in every system there is the potential for error, for misinterpretation, for failure. Petrov's night in September 1983 serves as a cautionary tale. Humans must remain engaged, skeptical, and empowered to act when machines err. The balance between automation and human agency is not merely technical, it is ethical, existential, and deeply human. The final lesson is one of humility. History often remembers grand narratives of leaders, battles, and treaties. Yet sometimes the survival of civilization depends not on generals or presidents, but on a single individual quietly exercising judgment in a window of seconds. Petrov did not seek glory, he did not expect acknowledgement. He acted because he understood the stakes and trusted his own assessment. His decision preserved millions of lives, yet it remained for decades a secret known only to the classified pages of Soviet military logs. In the quiet moments of reflection, one can imagine Petrov in that bunker, the red alarm gone, the screens dark, the world still turning outside. He did not celebrate, he did not speak of heroism. He simply returned to duty, aware that the day had passed without catastrophe, and that the extraordinary weight of history had rested momentarily on his shoulders. From this perspective, the story of Stanislav Petrov is not merely a historical anecdote, it is a meditation on the fragility of civilization. It reminds us that technology alone cannot safeguard humanity. It teaches that moral courage, analytical reasoning, and the willingness to question assumptions are essential in a world where errors can escalate to extinction. And it whispers quietly that the most consequential acts may leave no trace beyond the continuation of ordinary life. In the end, the final image is almost banal. A lieutenant colonel walks out of the underground command center as dawn breaks. The world above is unaware that it owes its survival to him. Birds fly, factories hum, people sleep, and yet beneath the calm surface, civilization has been spared, not by doctrine, not by power, but by judgment. The quiet heroism of that night stands as a lesson for all time, that human reason, exercised under pressure, can be the most profound safeguard against annihilation. Petrov passed away in 2017, largely unheralded, but his legacy persists. Scholars, journalists, and ordinary citizens continue to reflect on the consequences of a single decision made in a subterranean bunker in Moscow nearly 40 years ago. The incident underscores the enduring vulnerability of humanity, the power of individual agency, and the imperative of vigilance, wisdom, and moral courage in a world where the next red screen could appear at any moment. The final finale of Stanislav Petrov's story is thus both humbling and inspiring. No parades, no speeches, no dramatics, just a man, a decision, and a world allowed to continue. In a universe governed by chance, error, and imperfect technology, it is often the unassuming act, the moment of hesitation, the refusal to obey blindly, that preserves life itself. History is indebted to Petrov, not for creating change, but for ensuring the possibility of change in the first place. His life teaches us that vigilance, intelligence, and courage, exercised in silence, can echo through time, shaping the world in ways invisible but irrevocable.